This is Land of Havilah, 2 Chronicles 20. When Jehoshaphat took the throne 3 chapters ago, quote, the fear of Yahweh fell on all the kingdoms of the lands that were around Judah, so that they made no war against Jehoshaphat, 2 Chronicles 17:10. And still so far there's been no foreign aggression against him. But now, verse 1. After this, the children of Moab, the children of Ammon, and with them some of the Ammonites, came against Jehoshaphat to battle. Then some came who told Jehoshaphat, saying, A great multitude's coming against you from beyond the sea from Syria. Behold, they're in Hazazon Tamar, that is, En Gedi. Comment, it's pretty obvious verses 1 and 2 have a couple of corruptions in the manuscript. Other manuscripts say some of the Meunites in place of some of the Ammonites, and Edom instead of Syria, which makes a lot more sense in the context of this passage. In other words, 3 foreign armies have gathered near the shore of the Dead Sea. They're at En Gedi, which is 25 miles southeast of Jerusalem. They're from Ammon, which is across the Jordan River, Moab, which is on the other side of the Dead Sea, and Meon, which is south of Moab in the vicinity of Mount Seir. In verse 2, they're a great multitude, and someone just reported it to Jehoshaphat. Verse 3. Jehoshaphat was alarmed and set himself to seek Yahweh. He proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. Judah gathered themselves together to seek help from Yahweh. They came out of all the cities of Judah to seek Yahweh. Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem in Yahweh's house before the new court. Comment, the new court's obscure as to which king built it and when, but as verse 5 says, it's attached to the temple. Judah's gathered in the court. They're alarmed. They're fasting. They've come to seek Yahweh. And Jehoshaphat just stood up. Verse 6. And he said, Yahweh, the God of our fathers, aren't you God in heaven? Aren't you ruler over all the kingdoms of the nations? Power and might are in your hands, so that no one's able to withstand you. Didn't you, our God, drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel, and give it to the offspring of Abraham, your friend, forever? They lived in it and have built you a sanctuary in it for your name, saying, If evil comes on us, the sword, judgment, pestilence, or famine, we'll stand before this house and before you, for your name is in this house, and cry to you in our affliction, and you will hear and save. Now behold, the children of Ammon and Moab and Mount Seir, whom you would not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, but they turned away from them and didn't destroy them, behold, how they reward us to come to cast us out of your possession, which you've given us to inherit. Our God, will you not judge them? For we have no might against this great company that comes against us. We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Comment in verses 6 to 12, Jehoshaphat demonstrated his knowledge of the history of Israel and of the Scripture. In verse 6 he says, Yahweh rules over all kingdoms and nations, and no one's able to withstand him. Yahweh's not one of many, he's the only. This goes back to Moses at least, who said Yahweh was, quote, God in heaven above and on earth beneath. There is no one else, Deuteronomy 4:39. And further back it goes to Abraham. Abraham knew Yahweh was almighty, Genesis 17:1. And further back to the beginning, to Adam, because of course Adam knew he was the creator. In verse 7, Jehoshaphat claimed Yahweh gave Israel the land they're living on forever, which indeed is what Yahweh told Abraham, quote, I'll give all the land which you see to you and to your offspring forever, Genesis 13:15. In verses 8 and 9, Jehoshaphat moved up to more recent history, recalling his great-great-grandfather Solomon's prayer when he dedicated the temple, that if there was threat of invasion and Yahweh's people would stand in front of the temple and pray, Yahweh would deliver them. In verses 10 and 11, it was back to Mosaic times that when Israel was marching toward the Promised Land, Yahweh instructed Israel not to harm the Moabites or the Ammonites, so Israel left them alone. And now this is how Moab and Ammon are rewarding them by threatening to invade. In verse 12, Jehoshaphat says Judah has no might against such a great company. And then the most quotable line of the prayer, quote, We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Verse 13, All Judah stood before Yahweh with their little ones, their wives, and their children. Then Yahweh's Spirit came on Jahaziel, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, the son of Jael, the son of Mattaniah, the Levite, of the sons of Asaph, in the middle of the assembly. Comment, Jahaziel's a Levite descended from Asaph, the famous prophet and musician from 5 generations before. Verse 15. And he said, Listen, all Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem, and you, King Jehoshaphat. Yahweh says to you, Don't be afraid and don't be dismayed because of this great multitude, for the battle's not yours, but God's. Tomorrow go down against them. Comment, now some military intelligence from Yahweh as Jahaziel keeps speaking, still in verse 16. Behold, they're coming up by the ascent of Ziz. You'll find them at the end of the valley, before the wilderness of Jeruel. You'll not need to fight this battle. Set yourselves, stand still, and see the salvation of Yahweh with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Don't be afraid nor be dismayed. Go out against them tomorrow, for Yahweh's with you. Comment, that was the end of the prophecy. According to Jahaziel, Yahweh's word is that tomorrow the foreign armies will be marching up the ascent of Ziz, meaning up the slope from the Dead Sea to the Judean highlands, the Dead Sea being 1,400 feet below sea level, and the highlands about 2,500 feet above sea level. The Judean army should march downhill to meet them, but they shouldn't expect a fight. They should only set themselves, stand still, and see the salvation of Yahweh, in verse 17, meaning do nothing and watch what happens. Did Jehoshaphat and Judah have confidence that Jahaziel's prophecy is accurate? He must have already proven himself as a prophet, because, verse 18, Jehoshaphat bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell down before Yahweh, worshiping Yahweh. The Levites of the children of the Kohathites and of the children of the Korahites stood up to praise Yahweh, the God of Israel, with an exceeding loud voice. Comment, Jehoshaphat, the Levites, and all Judah and Jerusalem have expressed confidence in the prophecy. Verse 20. They rose early in the morning and went out into the wilderness of Tekoa. Comment, they're heading to the ascent of Ziz to go down it. The ascent of Ziz is unknown, but it must be one of the valleys that drains from the highlands into the Dead Sea. Verse 20. As they went out, Jehoshaphat stood and said, Listen to me, Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in Yahweh your God, so you will be established. Believe his prophets, so you will prosper. Comment, those words are generally applicable to anyone, anytime. Quote, Believe in Yahweh your God, so you will be established. Believe his prophets, so you will prosper. End quote. Since Yahweh said this was his battle and not theirs, verse 21. When he had taken counsel with the people, he appointed those who were to sing to Yahweh and give praise in holy array as they go out before the army and say, Give thanks to Yahweh, for his loving kindness endures forever. Comment, verse 21, the Levite singers will lead the way. After all, it was a Levite who delivered the prophecy, and it was the Levites who stood up to cheer the prophecy with an exceeding loud voice in verse 19, and Yahweh's pretty much indicated there'll be no fighting on Judah's part, so why shouldn't the Levite choir go out front? Verse 22. When they began to sing and to praise, Yahweh set ambushers against the children of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who had come against Judah, and they were struck. For the children of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir, to utterly kill and destroy them. And when they had finished the inhabitants of Seir, everyone helped to destroy another. Comment in verse 22, Yahweh responded to the musical praise. He set ambushers against the enemy, maybe indicating angels. In verse 23, the enemy turned on each other. For some reason, the Moabites and Ammonites destroyed the Meunites from Mount Seir first, then the Ammonites and Moabites destroyed each other. Verse 24. When Judah came to the place overlooking the wilderness, they looked at the multitude, and behold, they were dead bodies fallen to the earth, and there were none who escaped. Comment, coming up, dead bodies is probably a corruption of the text and should probably read clothing per the NET Bible translation notes. Verse 25. When Jehoshaphat and his people came to take their plunder, they found among them in abundance both riches and dead bodies and precious jewels, which they stripped off for themselves, more than they could carry away. They took plunder for 3 days, it was so much. On the 4th day they assembled themselves in Berakah Valley, for there they blessed Yahweh. Therefore the name of that place was called Berakah Valley to this day. Comment, Berakah means blessing, which has the same root as to praise. So the place they gathered afterward on the 4th day to give thanks was called the Valley of Praise or Valley of Blessing from then on. It was the praise and blessing before the battle to which Yahweh had responded. It's not that Yahweh feels the need to be praised. He's not needy. But as Jesus said, I don't receive glory from men, John 5:41. Since God has no need of our praise, the praise is for us because it reminds us of who God is and sets us on a straight path in our thinking. Our praise does bless God, though, for the reason that He's glad when we understand who He is and get ourselves straightened out. Verse 27. Then they returned, every man of Judah and Jerusalem, with Jehoshaphat in front of them, to go again to Jerusalem with joy, for Yahweh had made them to rejoice over their enemies. They came to Jerusalem with stringed instruments, harps, and trumpets to Yahweh's house. The fear of God was on all the kingdoms of the countries when they heard that Yahweh fought against the enemies of Israel. So the realm of Jehoshaphat was quiet, for his God gave him rest all around. Comment, word spread to the surrounding countries, and no foreign army wanted to attack Judah because it didn't want Yahweh to strike them. Now the summary of Jehoshaphat's life, verse 31. Jehoshaphat reigned over Judah. He was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shili. He walked in the way of Asa his father, and didn't turn away from it, doing that which was right in Yahweh's eyes. However, the high places were not taken away, and the people had still not set their hearts on the God of their fathers. Comment, 3 chapters ago in 17:6, Jehoshaphat destroyed the high places, but in verse 33 we just read, some high places remained, seemingly due to the people's obstinance. But it was a pretty good overall summary for Jehoshaphat in verse 32. He didn't turn away from doing that which was right in Yahweh's eyes. Verse 34. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, first and last, behold, they're written in the history of Jehu the son of Hanani, which is included in the book of the kings of Israel. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, joined himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel. The same did very wickedly. Comment, as we know, Jehoshaphat made an alliance with Ahab of Israel and went to war with him to support him at Ramoth-Gilead, for which Yahweh rebuked Jehoshaphat in the last chapter. But in verse 34, speaking of the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat, the unmentioned things here, Jehoshaphat supported Ahab's son Ahaziah in a war against Moab, 2 Kings 3. Yahweh miraculously spared Jehoshaphat from that one, too. Now coming up a commercial venture with the same wicked Ahaziah, verse 36. He joined himself with him to make ships to go to Tarshish. They made the ships in Ezion-Geber. Then Eliezer, the son of Dodavahu of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, because you've joined yourself with Ahaziah, Yahweh has destroyed your works. The ships were wrecked, so they were not able to go to Tarshish. Comment, Ezion-Geber is a long way south of Judah on the Gulf of Aqaba. The ships Jehoshaphat built there wrecked before the first voyage, 1 Kings 22:8. Ahaziah of Israel wanted Jehoshaphat to try again and to join him in the venture, but this time Jehoshaphat said no, 1 Kings 22:49. So Jehoshaphat finally learned something after 2 military misadventures with the house of Ahab, 2 rebukes from 2 prophets, and the wrecking of his ships. 2 Chronicles 21 is next.